The mirror is not a weapon until you make it one. Admiral Eva Thorne stood on the command deck of the fleet carrier Resolute, her gaze fixed on the impossible geometry of the Verity Covenant blockade. 112 Covenant warships formed a perfect sphere of overlapping weapon emplacements around the colony world of New Damascus. On the main hololith, a crimson timer ticked down with unnerving calm. 59:47. The ultimatum was simple and monstrous: surrender 10,000 colonists for re-education, or the orbital bombardment would commence. The Covenant did not negotiate. They issued decrees and settled accounts. Her fleet mind Lyceum spoke in her cranial implant, a voice like cooling glass. Their doctrine is a closed loop, Admiral. An ultimatum given is a battle already won in their tactical ledgers. They expect capitulation or destruction with no third option. The deck beneath her boots hummed with the quiet, potent energy of the ship's primary reactor, a constant reminder of the power she held in check. Thorne kept her hands clasped behind her back, her posture a study in defiant stillness against the silent threat painted across the void. The glare of the local star off the Covenant hulls was sharp and unforgiving. "Then we shall provide one," Thorne said, her voice low, but carrying across the hushed bridge. Her second-in-command, Commander Jian, stood at the tactical console, her own face a mask of disciplined tension. The air carried the faint, clean scent of ionized ozone from the life support scrubbers. The stakes were absolute, a world of 5 million souls against a doctrine that saw mercy as a flaw in its calculations. "They think in lines. We will answer with circles." A small vignette flickered to life on a secondary screen, a live feed from the surface. In a crowded subterranean shelter on New Damascus, a young girl was drawing on a datapad. She showed her creation to her mother, a crude but earnest sketch of a human fleet carrier, its running lights like a constellation of hope against a dark background. The mother hugged her daughter tightly, whispering words of reassurance that were lost to the audio pickup, but the sentiment was clear. The weight of that small, silent scene settled on Thorne's shoulders, heavier than any armor. "Lyceum, confirm their lattice integrity," Thorne commanded, turning her attention back to the tactical display. "Are they sharing targeting data as a unified network, or is each ship processing independently?" This was the first mystery, the first seam she needed to exploit. The Covenant's strength was their rigid formation and unwavering adherence to doctrine. Their strength was their weakness. They are networked, but with a command lag, the AI responded instantly. Each ship processes threats locally before uploading to the central command node aboard their flagship, the final word. There is a 1.2-second delay for network-wide consensus. It is a system built for overwhelming singular threats. A heartbeat of vibration ran through the deck plating as the Resolute made a minor course correction, a ghost in the machine. "Not for 1,000 whispers," Thorne murmured. "Commander Jian, prepare the decoy swarms. Load them with the Echo Bloom emitters. I want it to look like a full-scale fleet emerging from every shadow." The console before Jian lit up with confirmation icons, the soft chime a prelude to the coming storm. "We will not be the monsters they expect." "Aye, Admiral." Emitters primed, Jian confirmed, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. "We have calculated their likely firing solutions. They will target the largest signatures first, assuming a conventional carrier-led assault." The faint hiss of the cabin's pressurization system seemed to grow louder in the expectant silence. It was a gamble, a feint designed to make the enemy punch at ghosts. Thorne nodded, her eyes never leaving the main display. "Lyceum, I want you to piggyback a data packet on the first wave of echoes, a simple open ledger. On one side, list the number of colonists they have demanded. On the other, leave a blank space. It was a psychological jab, a message tailored to an enemy obsessed with accounts and balances. Let them see the cost they were demanding in the stark, cold light of their own obsession. Packet prepared." Admiral Lyceum confirmed. It is unconventional. The AI's tone was neutral, but Thorne could sense the undercurrent of analytical curiosity. This was not a standard military tactic. It was a lesson, and class was about to begin. Their bookkeeping is a weapon. Ours is a witness. The ultimatum timer clicked past 0730. Jean. The order was given. From the launch bays of the Resolute and its escorting cruisers, 1,000 silent shapes detached and accelerated. They were little more than cheap drone frames with oversized emitters, but in the void they would bloom into phantoms. They would become the fleet the Covenant expected, a frontal assault to be met with righteous fire. On the bridge of the final word, Covenant Proctor. Valerius watched his tactical display populate with hostile. They were numerous, far more than his intelligence had predicted. He permitted himself a thin, bloodless smile. The humans were predictable in their desperation, throwing their full strength against his perfect, unyielding blockade. Their emotional response was a liability he would gladly exploit. Target the command signatures, Valerius ordered, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Fire at will. Let the ledger record their folly. His bridge crew, clad in stark white uniforms, moved with an unnerving, synchronized precision. The console glare reflected off their impassive faces. They believe the universe bends to the strongest will. Heavy particle beams, lances of pure destructive energy, erupted from the Covenant warships. They sliced through the void, converging on the largest of the ghost signatures. The decoy drones vanished in silent, brilliant flashes of light, their mission accomplished. But as they died, the echo bloom emitters pulsed, creating secondary distorted signatures that flickered and danced, confusing the Covenant's targeting sensors for precious seconds. Phase 2, Thorne said calmly. The deck vibrated slightly as the real assets began to move. Hidden within the sensor chaos, a squadron of smaller, faster corvettes accelerated towards a pre-calculated gap in the blockade's coverage. They were the key, the scalpel that would carve a path for the true objective. They ran cold, their emissions masked by the ongoing light show. A new mystery emerged. Admiral Lyceum's voice was sharp. The Covenant is not just firing beams, they are projecting a wide-spectrum resonance field. It is tuning itself. They are attempting to differentiate between our decoys and our actual ships by analyzing engine mass ratios. This was an unexpected escalation, a clever counter to a standard deception tactic. A reckoning is not a tantrum, it is an audit. Thorne's jaw tightened. They were smarter than she had anticipated. Their doctrine wasn't just rigid, it was ruthlessly efficient. Jian, signal the corvettes. Tell them to vent plasma intermittently to mimic the heat signature of a larger vessel under strain. Lyceum, can you disrupt their tuning process? Feed them bad data. The low thrum of the ship's inertial dampeners was a steadying presence. I can inject chaotic resonance signals into their network, the AI replied. It will be noticeable. They will know we are actively interfering with their sensors, not just deploying passive decoys. It will confirm our technological parity. This was the risk. It would reveal a piece of her hand, but it was a necessary trade. Do it, Thorne ordered. We are not here to hide. We are here to teach. On the main screen, the corvettes, now glowing intermittently with vented plasma, continued their silent, deadly approach. The countdown showed 07:12:21. Every second felt like a lifetime. The air on the bridge was thick with unspoken tension, the only sound the soft hum of the environmental controls. We hold the line by redrawing it. The Covenant's resonance field wavered as Lyceum's counterpulse hit their network. On the bridge of the final word. Proctor. Valerius saw the data streams corrupt. The clear signals his sensors had been resolving moments before devolved into a storm of digital noise. He frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. The humans were more resourceful than their file suggested. Isolate the source of the interference, he commanded. Filter it out. All ships, tighten the formation. Close the gaps. The great sphere of warships began to contract, a ponderous and menacing movement that reduced the safe corridors for Thorn's corvettes. Aboard the lead corvette, the Pathfinder Lieutenant Commander Eva Rostov watched her own tactical display. "The gap is closing," she reported to the Resolute. "We can still make it, but the margin for error is gone." Her heartbeat was a steady drum in her ears, a counterpoint to the soft hiss of her suit's life support. The plan was changing, escalating. Their certainty is a cage of their own making. "Admiral, the corvettes are exposed," Jian stated, her voice tight. "If the Covenant resolves their signatures, they will be annihilated." The cost of this first move was suddenly terrifyingly apparent. 3 ships, 240 souls were balanced on a knife's edge. Thorn took a deep breath, the recycled air tasting sterile and cold. "Lyceum, it's time. Deploy the Lattice." This was her true gambit, the core of her strategy. It was a technology the Covenant had never encountered, born not of a desire for destruction, but for redirection. Deploying Mirror Lattice, the AI confirmed. From shielded compartments along the Resolute's dorsal spine, thousands of small hexagonal plates launched into the void. They were not weapons. They were perfect hyper-refractive mirrors, each one capable of catching and redirecting a particle beam with near-perfect efficiency. They arranged themselves in a vast shimmering web between the corvettes and the Covenant fleet. "They will aim at us and strike themselves." Proctor Valerius saw the new objects on his screen. They were small, inert, and radiated no energy. He dismissed them as chaff, a last desperate attempt at confusing his sensors. He had already accounted for such primitive tactics. "Maintain firing discipline," he ordered. "Target the heat-blooming signatures. Erase them." The Covenant fleet fired again. Lances of white-hot energy crossed the void, aimed at the exposed corvettes. But they never reached their targets. They struck the Mirror Lattice. The beams, instead of being absorbed or dispersed, were caught up. They were turned. In a stunning display of calculated geometry, the particle lances were redirected not back at the ships that had fired them, but at their neighbors. A ship in the Covenant's northern hemisphere fired south, and its beam was bent 90 degrees to strike a ship in the eastern hemisphere. A blast from the west was turned to hit a ship in the west. The perfect sphere of the blockade began to tear itself apart, struck by its own weapons. On the Resolute's bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence. The light from the redirected beams cast long, dancing shadows across the command deck. A debt paid with borrowed coin is still a debt. Confusion reigned on the bridge of the final word. Alarms blared as damage reports flooded in from multiple ships simultaneously. Valerius stared at his screen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. His own fleet was firing on itself. The arrogant certainty on his face was replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. "Cease fire," he roared. "All ships cease fire." The order was slow to propagate through the network, and for several more seconds the self-inflicted carnage continued. When the beams finally subsided, the perfect formation was broken. Several Covenant ships were venting atmosphere, their shields flickering weakly. No ships were destroyed, but they were wounded, their cohesion shattered. This was a tangible cost, a physical entry in the ledger. "The corvettes are through," Jian reported, a note of triumph in her voice. "They are approaching the inner perimeter." The air on the Resolute's bridge crackled with energy, the scent of ozone now mingled with something that felt like victory. The countdown timer, forgotten for a moment, continued its inexorable march. 4803. "We teach by numbers and remember by ledgers, never by collars." Thorn allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The first lesson had been delivered. The Covenant's own strength, their rigid formation and overwhelming firepower had been turned against them. But this was only the beginning. The blockade was damaged, but not broken. Valerius would adapt. He would learn. "Lyceum, what is he doing?" Thorn asked, her eyes already searching for the enemy's next move. The heat from the Resolute's own systems was a palpable presence, now the coolant systems working harder to maintain equilibrium. "He is collapsing the inner sphere," the AI reported. "He is sacrificing coverage to create a concentrated kill box around the planet." "He is learning, Admiral. He is changing the equation." The remaining Covenant ships were moving, forming a dense, impenetrable wall directly between the corvettes and New Damascus. It was a brutal but effective response. "A cornered animal is at its most dangerous. He's creating a trap," Gian observed, her earlier elation evaporating. "The corvettes can't breach that. They'll be torn to shreds." The tactical display shifted, showing the new terrifyingly dense formation. The path was closed. Before Thorn could respond, a new alert flashed on her console. It was from the surface. A Priority 1 civilian signal somehow bypassing the Covenant's jamming. It was a single, repeating audio file. The voice of the colonial governor, strained but resolute. "We will not be the price of your lesson. We will not be your martyrs. We have initiated the Scourge Protocol. May history judge us kindly." Thorn's blood ran cold. The Scourge Protocol was a planetary self-destruct system, a scorched earth policy of last resort. It was designed to render a world uninhabitable for centuries, denying it to any conqueror. The countdown had been a lie. The true timer was now in the hands of the colonists themselves. "The most honest answers are given under duress." "Lyceum, get me a timeline on that protocol," Thorn snapped. The hum of the deck beneath her feet felt like a death rattle. The situation had escalated beyond her control. This was the second plan-changing moment, and it was a gut punch. "Unknown." Admiral Lyceum replied, its placid voice a stark contrast to the rising panic on the bridge. "The protocol is internal to the colony's systems, but it is by its nature irreversible once initiated. They are preparing to destroy their own world to spite the Covenant." Proctor Valerius on his own bridge received the same message. For the first time, a genuine emotion flickered in his eyes, frustration. The prize he had come to claim was threatening to turn to ash. His ledger, which had demanded 10,000 lives, was now being threatened with the loss of 5 million and the world itself. The cost was becoming unacceptable. His ultimatum doctrine had no contingency for a target that chose self-immolation over compliance. It was a variable his rigid calculations could not account for. He had been flipped, his own tactics turned into a tool of his enemy's resolve. The ultimatum was now a liability. "A cage is a cage even if you hold the key." "He's caught," Gian breathed, seeing the strategic paralysis on the hololith. If he attacks, he triggers the Scourge. If he retreats, he violates his own doctrine. He has to stand there and watch. The irony was as thick as the tension on the bridge. Thorn felt no triumph, only a cold dread. This was not the lesson she had intended to teach. "This is not a victory, Commander. This is a tragedy in the making." She looked at the image of the little girl drawing on her datapad, a ghost on the screen. The stakes were no longer about winning a battle. They were about saving a people from their own desperate courage. "Lyceum," Thorn said, her voice hard as diamond. "Open a direct channel to Proctor Valerius. No encryption, no protocols. I want to talk to him." She straightened her uniform, the crisp fabric a small anchor in the swirling chaos. The heat from the overworked tactical displays washed over her face. "The only way out is through the truth." "Channel open," Admiral Lyceum confirmed. A moment later, the face of Proctor Valerius appeared on the main screen. He looked regal, severe, and for the first time uncertain. The perfect composure had a crack in it. "Admiral Thorn, he said, his voice a low growl. "Your tricks are meaningless. This changes nothing. The ultimatum stands." Even now he clung to the words, to the doctrine that was the foundation of his power. "Your ultimatum is irrelevant," Proctor Thorne countered, her voice calm and clear. "The people of New Damascus have made their own. They have chosen to deny you your prize at any cost. Your ledger is about to be balanced with an entry of 0. The slight vibration of the deck seemed to underscore her words. She had to pivot. The military confrontation had become a moral one. The battle of ships and beams was now a battle of wills broadcast across the system for all to see. The mirror Lattice had shown him the cost of his tactics. Now she had to show him the cost of his doctrine. "A mirror shows you what you are not, what you wish to be." "This is a lie," Valerius snarled, but the denial was weak. He was checking his own sensor feeds, looking for confirmation, for some sign of human deception. But the energy readings from the planet's core reactor were undeniable. They were building towards a critical overload. "Look at your own data," Proctor Thorne pressed. "This is the consequence of a philosophy that offers only submission or death. You have given them no other choice. You have pushed them to this edge." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes boring into his. "The question is no longer what I will do. The question is, what will you do? Will you be the author of their extinction?" A new alert pinged softly on Jian's console. "Admiral, the corvettes. They're not waiting. They're accelerating. Directly into the kill box." The situation was spiraling, another unforeseen escalation. Lieutenant Commander Rostov was forcing the issue, refusing to stand by while a world died. "The bravest moves are made when the rules have failed." "Rostov, belay that order," Jian transmitted, her voice sharp. But there was no response. The corvettes were on their own initiative, a desperate suicidal charge. They were choosing their own terms of engagement. Thorne watched the small icons of the corvettes streaking towards the dense wall of Covenant warships. It was a foolish, heroic, and utterly human thing to do. It was a choice born of compassion, not calculus. And in that moment, it changed the entire strategic landscape once again. Valerius saw it too. The small ships charging his line. He could obliterate them in an instant. It would be a simple, clean entry in his battle logs. But it would also be an act of overt aggression broadcast live against an enemy trying to prevent a planetary suicide he himself had provoked. The optics were a nightmare. The ledger was becoming hopelessly complicated. He was trapped between doctrine and disaster. "You see," Proctor Thorne said softly, her voice now a sad, knowing whisper, "your doctrine has a flaw. It assumes your opponent is a reflection of yourself, logical, calculating, and concerned only with material gain or loss. It has no column in its ledger for self-sacrifice. It has no way to account for hope." The scent of ozone on the bridge seemed stronger now, sharp and electric. The corvettes closed the distance. The Covenant ships held their fire. For a few heart-stopping seconds, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The small, brave ships were about to be erased. The countdown timer on Thorne's screen felt utterly meaningless, now an artifact from a different, simpler conflict. Then something unbelievable happened. One of the Covenant cruisers, a ship on the edge of the kill box, shifted its position slightly. It moved just enough to create a tiny, fleeting gap in the wall of death. It was a deliberate act, a clear violation of formation protocol. A single crack can bring down a dam. Lyceum's voice was instantaneous in Thorne's implant. "Admiral, that ship." Its captain just transmitted a single encrypted word on a closed channel directed at the Corvette squadron, live. The AI sounded for the first time surprised. The cold calculus had been broken by an act of conscience. The Pathfinder shot through the gap, followed by the rest of its squadron. They were through the kill box, past the point of no return. They were now in the clear, streaking towards the besieged world of New Damascus. They were not a relief force. They were not an invasion. They were a handful of ships, a few hundred souls going to stand with a world on the brink of oblivion. Proctor Valerius watched it happen, his face a mask of stone. One of his own captains had defied him, had broken the sacred doctrine. The entire foundation of his strategy, of his culture, was crumbling before his eyes. The humans had not defeated his fleet. They had defeated his philosophy. Their system was perfect until it met people. "Your move," Proctor Thorne said, keeping the pressure on. "You can open fire and start a civil war within your own fleet, or you can stand down. The choice is yours. The entire sector is watching. The ledger is open for all to see." The glare from the tactical hololith illuminated the stark determination on her face. The ultimatum had been turned completely inside out. The power was no longer his to wield. He was the one with a timer counting down a choice to make between two impossible options. He had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about order and consequence. Instead, Admiral Eva Thorne had taught him a lesson about the fatal flaw in any doctrine that leaves no room for mercy. Before Valerius could censor song, Lyceum cut in again, its voice urgent. "Admiral, the corvettes are broadcasting. It's Lieutenant Commander Rostov. She is hailing the colonial governor. She is offering to evacuate the command staff who initiated the Scourge Protocol. She is offering them asylum and safe passage." The air on the bridge seemed to crystallize, each molecule vibrating with the weight of the moment. A hand extended is more powerful than a fist clenched. Rostov was not just breaking the siege. She was de-escalating the new crisis, offering a way out that wasn't self-destruction. She was presenting a third option to the colonists, just as Thorne had presented one to the Covenant. It was a move of profound, uncalculated empathy, a lifeline thrown not just to the governor, but to everyone watching. Thorne watched the face of Proctor Valerius. She saw the war within him, the rigid conditioning of a lifetime battling against the undeniable truth of his position. He was checked. His opponent was not the human fleet. It was the human spirit. And his doctrine had no counter for it. The silence stretched thick and heavy. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the Resolute's life support. The countdown to oblivion on New Damascus was still ticking, but for the first time there was a chance it could be stopped. It all depended on the next words spoken. It all came down to one man's pride versus the fate of a world. "Hold the breath. Hold the line. Hold the faith." Commander Jan Thorne ordered, her voice quiet but firm, never taking her eyes off Valerius. "Bring the Resolute forward. Slowly. Position us between the Covenant fleet and the corvette's path. Not as a threat. As a shield." The deck beneath them gave a gentle shudder as the immense carrier began to move, a silent guardian angel for its brave children. The massive ship eased into the void, its shadow falling across the wounded Covenant vessels. It was an unmistakable statement. It said, "The lesson is over. Now we protect. We will be the final barrier." The cost of firing on those corvettes would now be open war with a fully armed fleet carrier. It was a dare wrapped in an act of mercy. Valerius closed his eyes for a single pained moment. When he opened them, the rigid certainty was gone, replaced by something that looked like defeat. He had lost control of the narrative, the battle, and his own fleet. The ultimatum doctrine was a shattered mirror at his feet. His perfect ledger was a ruin. "The account is closed." His voice, when it came, was a frayed wire. "All Covenant vessels." Valerius broadcast, his words clipped and heavy with a defeat he could not mask. "Stand down. Hold your positions. Acknowledge." One by one, the lights on the Covenant warships flickered in a sequence of compliance. The order was obeyed. The great wounded machine of the blockade had been halted not by force but by a simple, impossible choice. The tension on the Resolute's bridge did not break. It merely changed its nature from the sharp edge of imminent combat to the heavy weight of an unresolved peace. A ledger is a mirror for memory. On New Damascus Governor Eris Thorn, no relation to the Admiral, a coincidence of galactic diaspora, watched the human corvettes approaching on his own tactical display. His hand hovered over the master control for the Scourge protocol, his knuckles white. The countdown was internal, a silent promise he had made to his people. He saw the offer of asylum from Lieutenant Commander Rostov. It was a lifeline, but it was also a test. They offer to save us, but only after we agree to abandon our home, Aris said to his council, his voice rough with exhaustion and suspicion. Is that a rescue or a gilded cage? The air in the command bunker was stale, thick with the scent of fear and recycled oxygen. His people were watching him, their faces illuminated by the grim red light of the emergency systems. Sir, a young aide spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. They didn't fire. The fleet out there, they took the hit for us. They put themselves in the way. She pointed to the screen where the colossal form of the Resolute now stood between them and their executioners. That single silent act of guardianship was more persuasive than any words. True power isn't forcing a hand, but opening one. Aboard the Pathfinder, Rostov hailed the governor again. Governor Aris, we are not here to escort you from your home. We are here to ensure you have a home to save. Stand down the protocol. Let us show the Covenant what a real choice looks like. Her voice was steady, a beacon of calm in the storm. She was betting everything on the governor's faith. Back on the Resolute, Admiral Thorn monitored the exchange. The situation was still balanced on a razor's edge. A single misstep, a single moment of fear could still plunge the entire system into catastrophe. The heat from the command consoles felt oppressive, a physical manifestation of the immense pressure. Lyceum Thorn said, her voice a low murmur. What is the psychological profile on Valerius now that his doctrine has failed? What is his most probable course of action? She needed to anticipate his pivot to stay 3 moves ahead. The military victory was won. The moral victory was still in play. He is a zealot whose faith has been shattered, the AI replied. The slight hum of the ship's gravity projectors seemed to deepen. He will seek to preserve the institution even if it means sacrificing the doctrine. He will look for a way to retreat, reframe the loss, and preserve the Covenant's authority. He is looking for an exit. They will try to erase the lesson. We can't allow that, Gian stated, overhearing the exchange. They can't just walk away from this. They threatened millions of lives. There has to be a reckoning. Her fists were clenched at her sides, her face a storm of righteous anger. A reckoning is not the same as revenge, Commander Thorn cautioned gently. Revenge creates martyrs and perpetuates cycles. A reckoning creates precedent. She turned back to the main screen. The Covenant fleet was inert, waiting for a path to open, a way to leave without their power being fundamentally questioned. Thorn would not provide one. She would provide something else. A stage. Lyceum, you still have that open data packet piggybacked on their network, correct? The ledger, she asked, a new steely resolve in her tone. The final piece of her plan was falling into place. We will not let them forget the price. The packet is dormant, but active, Admiral Lyceum confirmed. They have been unable to purge it without resetting their entire comms network, an act that would leave them vulnerable. The AI's voice held a note of what could almost be described as satisfaction. The Trojan horse was still inside their walls. Goodthorn said, "Prepare to make it active. I want every ship in this system, every colony listening on long-range sensors to receive a direct data feed from that ledger. We are going to balance the books, in public." The glare from the hololith reflected in her eyes, making them shine with a cold, hard light. Suddenly, a priority alert flashed across the board. It was from one of the damaged Covenant ships, the Unwavering Scale. Admiral Jian reported, her voice sharp with alarm. That cruiser, the one that took a hit from its sister ship. Its reactor containment is failing. It's going critical. The cost of victory was coming due. A debt of violence is always paid in full. On the bridge of the Unwavering Scale, alarms blared a deafening chorus. Smoke filled the air, carrying the acrid metallic scent of burning circuitry. The captain, a woman named Kaylin, was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were clear and focused. Evacuate the engineering deck, she ordered. Seal the blast doors. Containment field is at 12%. Captain, her engineer yelled over the chaos. We can't hold it. The core is going to breach. The deck plates beneath their feet were vibrating violently, shaking the very bones of the ship. Annihilation was seconds away. Proctor Valerius watched from his flagship, his face pale. His doctrine had no provision for rendering aid to a ship that had failed. Weakness was to be purged. But to let over 1,000 of his own crew die while the humans watched, the shame would be unbearable. He was frozen, a prisoner of his own ideology. Thorn did not hesitate. Lyceum, hail that ship. Tell them to prepare for emergency evac. Jian, deploy the rescue shuttles. Get our people over there, now. There was no question, no calculation of risk. There were people dying. That was the only variable that mattered. A life saved is a universe rebuilt. Admiral, their reactor breach could destroy our shuttles, Jian warned, even as her hands flew across the console to execute the order. The risk was enormous. She was sending her own crew into a potential fireball. We are not the Verity Covenant, Commander, Thorn said, her voice ringing with absolute authority. We do not leave people to die. That is the lesson. That is the entire point. Her words cut through the tension on the bridge, a clear and unwavering statement of principle. The low thrum of the shuttle bay doors opening echoed through the ship. A small fleet of human rescue shuttles, painted a brilliant white and red, launched from the Resolute. They streaked towards the dying Covenant cruiser, tiny sparks of hope against the backdrop of the void. The Covenant fleet watched in stunned silence. Their enemy, the people they had come to subjugate, were risking their own lives to save them. The moral calculus of the situation was becoming impossibly skewed against them. The brightest lights are often found in the deepest darkness. In the command bunker on New Damascus, Governor Aris and his council watched the rescue operation unfold on their main screen. They saw the human shuttles braving the radiation shell of the crippled cruiser. They saw a compassion so profound, it defied the cold logic of war. The governor's hand moved away from the Scourge protocol control. He looked at his aide, the young woman who had spoken of the Resolute as a shield, and he nodded. Open a channel to the Pathfinder. Governor Aris said, his voice thick with emotion. Tell Lieutenant Commander Rostov. Tell her we accept her offer. The Scourge protocol is being disarmed. A wave of audible relief washed over the bunker. On the screen, the angry red light of the self-destruct system blinked out, replaced by a calm, steady green. The planet was safe. The people had chosen hope over ashes. Rostov's voice came back, professional but warm. Thank you, Governor. We're on our way. We'll help you coordinate relief and repair efforts. The corvettes, no longer a symbol of defiance, became one of partnership. They began a slow, graceful orbit of the world they had helped to save. A bridge built in a moment of grace can bear any weight. Aboard the Unwavering Scale, the first human rescue teams arrived. They moved with quiet efficiency, their medical kits and emergency void sealant ready. They did not speak of doctrine or ultimatums. They spoke of pressure suits and plasma burns. They treated the Covenant crew not as enemies, but as fellow spacers in distress. The suit-to-suit communications broadcast on an open channel were a testament to a shared humanity. Captain Kaylin watched as a human medic stabilized her first officer, the hiss of a dermal regenerator. a gentle counterpoint to the ship's dying groans. She met the medic's eyes through their visors. She could not speak, but in that silent exchange a lifetime of doctrinal certainty crumbled to dust. The humans were not the barbarians she had been taught they were. They were better. One of the human shuttles, the St. Jude, was hit by a pulse of hard radiation as it docked. Shuttle St. Jude reporting the pilot's voice was strained. "We have casualties. 2 crew members with severe radiation burns. But we have the last of their engineering team aboard. We're away." This was the cost, tangible and real. 2 of her own wounded but alive in an act of mercy. Thorne felt the weight of it, the bitter price of her principles. When the ledger is written in blood, every entry matters. With the last of the Covenant crew evacuated, the unwavering scale finally died. Its reactor core collapsed, but instead of a massive explosion, it imploded, tearing the ship apart in a silent, strangely beautiful vortex of collapsing metal and escaping light. The danger was past. 1,200 Covenant lives had been saved. Thorne turned her attention back to the main screen, where the impassive face of Proctor Valerius still watched. The rescue had been a message more powerful than any weapon. It had demonstrated the core difference between their 2 philosophies in a way that could not be argued or denied. Now Proctor Thorne said, her voice resonating with a new, unassailable moral authority. "We will finish our accounting." She gave a silent command to Lyceum. Across the system, on every ship and every colony's display, the dormant ledger flickered to life. The truth once spoken cannot be unheard. On one side of the ledger, in stark, simple text, appeared the words, "Covenant Ultimatum, 10,000. Colonists for re-education." On the other side, the blank space began to fill. Line by line, Lyceum populated the data time-stamped and verified by the Resolute's own sensor logs. 0648-03. Covenant fleet inflicts damage upon itself due to flawed tactical geometry. 06-15-21. New Damascus initiates planetary self-destruct in response to ultimatum. 05. 5011. Covenant. Captain of the Guiding Hand defies orders, allows human ships to pass. So 512-4. Human fleet risks its own ships and crew to rescue 1,200 Covenant lives. 5-18. New Damascus rescinds self-destruct order in response to human compassion. The list went on a simple factual narrative of the day's events. It was not propaganda. It was just the truth laid bare for all to see. It was a mirror held up to the Covenant's doctrine, and the reflection was monstrous. A doctrine is judged not by its promises, but by its consequences. "This is your legacy." Proctor Valerius Thorne's voice broadcast alongside the ledger, a calm, damning indictment. "This is the true cost of your ultimatum. A broken fleet, a near genocide, a rebellion in your own ranks, and a debt of lives you can never repay." The deck of the Resolute was utterly silent, every crew member watching the final act of this cosmic drama unfold. Valerius watched the ledger. He saw his perfect ordered philosophy reduced to a list of failures and brutalities. He saw the name of the captain who had defied him, recorded not as a traitor, but as a catalyst for mercy. The humans had not just defeated him. They had documented his downfall with his own cherished tool, the ledger. The trap had been sprung, and it was a cage made of pure, undeniable fact. "What do you want?" Admiral Valerius finally asked, his voice hollow, stripped of all its former arrogance. The question was not a challenge, but a plea. "I want you to add one final entry to that ledger," Thorne replied. "I want you to publicly and formally rescind the ultimatum doctrine, effective immediately. I want you to state for the permanent record that this philosophy is a failure, and that the Verity Covenant will seek a new way." The air crackled the faint scent of ozone, a reminder of the power held in reserve. "This is not an execution. It is an education." It was an impossible demand. It was asking him to dismantle the core of his culture, his power, his very identity in front of the entire galaxy. To refuse, however, was equally impossible. The human fleet was still there, a shield, a witness. His own crews had seen the truth. If he refused, he would not be a martyr. He would be a fool clinging to a failed idea as his authority evaporated. He looked away from the camera at something on his own bridge. Thorn suspected he was looking at the faces of his own crew, at the men and women who had just been saved by his enemy. He was a commander with no one left to command, a preacher with no one left who believed. A long moment passed. Then Valerius looked back at the screen. The defeat in his eyes had been replaced by a weary, profound clarity. He had been given a third option after all, not submission or death, but transformation. "Prepare a Covenant-wide broadcast," he said to his comms officer, his voice now steady. He turned back to Thorn. "You will have your entry, Admiral. The universe does not bargain, but it does balance." A new window opened on the public feed. It was Proctor Valerius addressing not Thorn, but the galaxy. He spoke for 3 minutes. He did not make excuses or offer justifications. He simply read the events from the human's ledger, his own voice confirming their truth. He ended with a single history-altering sentence. "By my authority as Proctor of the 7th Fleet, I declare the Ultimatum Doctrine to be a strategic and moral failure. It is hereby rescinded. A full accounting will be made. We have much to learn." He cut the feed. The ultimatum was dead. The precedent was set. Before anyone on the Resolute's bridge could react, another message appeared in the public ledger, a final institutional consequence logged for all time. By order of the Verity Covenant, High Council Fleet, Proctor Valerius is recalled. All fleet actions are suspended pending doctrinal review. The captain of the Guiding Hand is ordered to assume interim command. The system had corrected itself. The single act of defiance had become the new foundation. The Covenant fleet began to move. They did not retreat in shame. They reformed their movements slow and deliberate. Under new command, they moved into a respectful, distant orbit, their lights dimmed. They were no longer a blockade. They were a vigil. The crisis was over. Thorn watched the enemy ships, now quiet and humbled. She felt the deep, bone-weary exhaustion of a battle won, but also the quiet, steady hum of a future rewritten. The cost had been high. 2 of her crew were in the medical bay, their bodies burned by the radiation of mercy. But the victory was real, and it would echo through the stars for generations. She looked out at the velvet black, at the distant, steady lights of New Damascus, no longer a target, but a home. The mirror arrays of the Resolute, their work done, began to retract their shimmering surfaces, cooling from a brilliant active silver to a calm, restful pewter. Power is not a weapon to be wielded, but a current to be guided. It is a force that can be reflected, redirected, and focused. We came here expecting to face an enemy defined by their unyielding certainty, by a doctrine that saw the universe as a simple equation of will. But a mirror does not argue. It simply shows what is. We showed them their own reflection, and it was they who chose to break it. The most important ledgers are not written in ink or light, but in the choices we make when all other options have been exhausted. Their wall became a window.